picture this, right? It's 1922.
Okay.
You are in the Swiss canton of St. Gallen, and you're standing near the northern banks of Lake Zurich.
Sounds scenic.
It is, but the air is biting. The wind is just coming right off the water. And there's this prominent psychiatrist, Carl Jung, and he is out there literally hauling stones.
Wait, like doing manual labor.
Yeah, exactly. He's meticulously constructing this really basic two-story stone structure that he just calls the tower.
Oh, right, the Bullingdon Tower.
Yes, that's the one. And there is absolutely no electricity in this place. When the sun goes down, the only light is from these, flickering oil lamps.
Wow.
And the only heat is coming from a wood-burning fireplace. But right in the middle of this totally austere complex, Jung builds this one private office.
Let me guess, no one else is allowed in?
Nobody. He keeps this heavy iron key on him at all times. Absolutely no one enters that room without his explicit, direct permission.
See, when you describe it like that, it paints this really romantic, almost cinematic picture of the isolated genius, retreating to the woods.
Right, it sounds like a vacation.
Exactly. It sounds like a wealthy academic just building a vacation home to escape the daily grind and relax.
Which is the totally natural assumption, but it completely misses the reality of what was actually happening there.
Yeah, he wasn't relaxing at all.
Not even a little. This wasn't an escape from his work. This tower was an environment that was precision engineered to advance his work.
Because he was at a really critical juncture in his career at that point.
Hypercritical. The year prior, he had published Psychological Types, which was this book that just boldly challenged the foundational theories of his former mentor, Sigmund Freud.
And in the 1920s psychoanalytic community, going after Freud was a big deal.
Though it was equivalent to academic suicide.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you could back it up with just undeniable brilliance.
Right.
So Jung needed to produce this constant, rigorous stream of articles and books to validate his entirely new school of analytical psychology.
He needed to literally outthink Freud.
Exactly. He didn't retreat to the woods to stop working. He retreated because he needed to think harder than his hectic, upper-class life in Zurich would physically allow him to.
What's fascinating here is he essentially recognized that human cognition has gears. And his daily environment in the city was basically keeping him stuck in first gear.
Yeah, too many distractions.
Right, so he needed a sanctuary designed for a very specific, intense type of cognitive effort. An effort that is, frankly, rapidly disappearing from our modern landscape.
And that brings us perfectly to the mission of today's deep dive. Because Jung locked himself away to outthink Freud in 1922. But today, you, the listener, you're trying to outthink a globalized, algorithm-driven economy, and you're trying to do it while checking your email like 80 times a day.
Or responding to Slack messages in under 30 seconds.
Yeah, it's impossible. We have collectively lost the ability to go deep. So today, we are stripping away all the shallow productivity hacks. We are exploring the ultimate 21st century superpower.
We're going to dissect the critical difference between shallow work and deep work.
Exactly. Shallow work being those logistical, easily replicated tasks you do while you're distracted.
Like answering basic emails.
Right. And deep work being this distraction-free concentration that pushes your cognitive capacities to their absolute biological limits.
And this isn't just a moral argument about, working harder or being a better employee.
No, not at all.
It is purely about thriving in a rapidly shifting information economy. So we're going to look at the stark economic value of this depth.
And the neuroscience behind it, right?
Yes, exactly how focus actually alters the physical structure of your brain. And then we'll break down 4 specific rules for achieving focused success in a world that literally profits from your distraction.
I love it. So let's start with that economic reality. We're moving from Jung's stone tower straight into the modern digital landscape.
Which is a pretty volatile place right now.
It feels incredibly volatile. If you look at the labor market, it really feels like the ground is just shifting underneath us.
The ground is absolutely shifting. There are these MIT economists, Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee, and they call this the Great Restructuring.
The Great Restructuring. Okay, unpack that.
Well, their thesis is that our technology, specifically machine learning, automation, these massive globalized communication networks, they're racing ahead at an exponential rate.
Right.
But human skills and traditional corporate structures are lagging linearly behind.
So the machines are outpacing us.
Far outpacing us. And as these intelligent machines improve, the labor market isn't just evolving slowly, it's dramatically dividing.
It's the end of that whole rising tide lifts all boats era, isn't it? The middle is just getting hollowed out.
Yeah, the middle is disappearing. And Brynjolfsson and McAfee identify 3 specific groups that will not just survive this restructuring, but they're going to absolutely dominate.
They're going to reap the disproportionate rewards.
Exactly. The first group is the high-skilled workers.
Okay, who are they?
These are the individuals who have this rare, almost oracular ability to work creatively and fluidly with complex, intelligent machines.
So, like, really advanced data people.
Yeah, think of someone like Nate Silver. He doesn't just, read political polls.
Right, he aggregates them.
He feeds thousands of disparate data points into these massive databases using languages like SQL, and then he leverages complex software like Stata to run Monte Carlo simulations. The machines aren't a threat to his job at all.
They're actually the amplifiers of his specific genius.
Exactly. They make him invaluable.
Okay, so that's group one. And I look at the second group, they identify the superstars, and it fundamentally changes how I view hiring.
Oh, it completely upends traditional hiring.
Right. Because of high-speed fiber optics and cloud computing and all these virtual collaboration tools, regionalism is basically dead in the knowledge sector.
Completely dead.
Like, if I am launching a tech startup in Chicago today and I need a lead programmer, I am no longer restricted to just the best programmer within a 30-mile commuting radius of Chicago.
You can hire from anywhere.
Anywhere. I can hire David Heinemeier Hansen, the ace programmer who created Ruby on Rails.
Even if he prefers to work remotely from, like, Marbella, Spain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you are the absolute best in your field, the entire global market is suddenly your customer base.
Which is amazing if you're the superstar.
Right. But the flip side is terrifying. Because if you're just, pretty good, you're now competing against the entire planet.
Which is a massive source of economic anxiety for the average worker.
Totally.
And just to complete the economic picture, the third group that wins big in this restructuring is the owners.
Right. The people with the money.
Yeah, those with the capital to invest in these new technologies. Think of venture capitalists like John Doerr.
Right.
They fund a startup like Instagram, and it eventually sells for $1 billion while only employing like a dozen people.
13 people, I think it was.
Yeah, 13. The proportion of wealth flowing back to the capital investors in that dynamic is just unprecedented in economic history.
But, unless you, listening right now, have a spare $1 billion lying around, joining the owners group is probably off the table.
Sadly, yes.
But those first two groups, the high-skilled workers collaborating with machines and the superstars dominating global niches, those are accessible.
They are, but to join them, you need 2 core abilities.
Okay, what are they?
First, the ability to quickly master hard things, and second, the ability to produce at an elite level, both in terms of unassailable quality and speed.
And both of those abilities fundamentally require deep work.
Absolutely. To really ground this in reality, consider the case study of Jason Ben from the source text.
Oh, this story is so relatable.
It perfectly encapsulates this exact economic anxiety we're talking about. Ben was highly educated, right? He graduated from an elite college with a degree in economics.
Very solid background.
Yeah, and he took this supposedly prestigious job as a financial consultant.
But the prestigious job turned out to be mostly an illusion, right? He was essentially operating as a human router for data.
That is a perfect description. A human router. His primary responsibility was generating these financial reports.
Which required him to do what?
Spend hours upon hours manually copying, pasting, and manipulating data across massive spreadsheets.
Brutal. Just mindless clicking.
Totally mindless. And he quickly realized this process was incredibly inefficient. So he spent a little time teaching himself how to write basic Excel macros.
Okay, smart move.
Suddenly, a report that used to take him 6 grueling hours took less than an hour. He literally just clicked a button and watched the machine do the work.
See, that is the ultimate double-edged sword. On one hand, it's a brilliant life hack. You just freed up 5 hours of your day.
Yeah, but on the other hand,
it is an existentially terrifying realization. If your entire economic output can be replaced by a relatively simple macro that you learned on a weekend, your value in the marketplace is incredibly fragile.
you are highly, highly expendable.
Exactly. So Jason Ben realizes this, and he decides he needs to drastically increase his value. He quits his consulting job, moves back home, and decides to become a high-level computer programmer.
And this is where he hit the wall that stops almost every modern knowledge worker trying to level up.
The distraction rub.
Yes. Learning a highly complex, deeply abstract skill like programming requires intense, unbroken concentration. It demands deep work.
Right.
But Ben, like millions of us, realized he had completely lost the ability to go deep.
Like a muscle that atrophied.
Exactly. When he sat down to study, he found himself experiencing almost physical withdrawal. He was compulsively opening new tabs, checking his email, scrolling social media.
It's a compulsion.
By his own admission, he was spending up to 98% of his study time just mindlessly surfing the web.
98%. The friction of the hard task was just too much for his distracted brain to handle.
So what does he do to fix it?
He goes full Carl Jung. He forces a massive structural change. He locks himself in the room with absolutely no computer, no screens, no internet access whatsoever.
Yeah.
Just physical textbooks, index cards, and a highlighter.
He took the technology completely out of the equation.
He had to. He forced himself to read the concepts, highlight the code structures, and explain them out loud to an empty room, totally isolated from electronic distraction.
He essentially put himself through cognitive rehab.
That's exactly what it was. Rehab to train his brain to hold a singular focus again. And it paid off immensely for him.
Because he eventually got up to, 5 hours of focus?
Yeah, he eventually clocked 5 or more disconnected hours a day in that isolated room. He leveraged that newfound focus to get into a notoriously difficult coding boot camp, dev boot camp, graduated at the absolute top of his class, and immediately secured a tech job in Silicon Valley. He jumped his salary from $40,000 a year to over $100,000.
See, Ben's locked-room strategy wasn't just a psychological trick. It actually manipulated the literal biological reality of how the human brain learns.
Okay, let's unpack this because I want to get into the actual meat of the brain here. What is physically happening when we focus?
It all centers around a layer of fatty tissue called myelin.
Myelin, okay.
You have these neural pathways in your brain, and myelin acts like an insulator that grows around the axons of your neurons.
So think of it as the biological equivalent of insulating an electrical wire.
Exactly. When this fatty layer wraps around a specific neural circuit, it allows the brain cells to fire faster, cleaner, and with far less energy loss.
And this is how we actually acquire skills.
Modern performance psychology heavily suggests that skill acquisition is heavily dependent on this exact process. You get better at a skill, whether that's hitting a golf ball or writing Python code, as you develop more myelin around the specific neurons responsible for that action.
I want to replace a tired metaphor here if I can.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I used to think of learning, like going to the gym and doing a bicep curl, like you're just breaking down muscle to build it up.
Right, the brain as a muscle.
Yeah, but myelination isn't about muscle mass. It's about electrical efficiency.
That's a good way to put it.
It's more like you have this muddy, unpaved dirt road between two towns in your brain. The first time you try to send a signal like understanding a complex SQL query, it bumps along this dirt road. It's slow, and the signal gets degraded.
Right, it's clunky.
But when you focus intensely on that specific skill without any distractions, you force that specific neural circuit to fire in total isolation.
And that isolated firing does what?
That isolated repetitive firing triggers specialized cells called oligodendrocytes.
Oligodendrocyte.
Yeah. And they come in and start paving that dirt road. They wrap the myelin around the circuit, upgrading it from a dirt path to a multi-lane autobahn.
I love that.
The electrical signal no longer leaks out. It travels at lightning speed.
That paved highway metaphor is neurologically super accurate, and it perfectly explains the profound danger of distraction.
Because you're interrupting the paving process.
Precisely. If you try to learn that SQL query while you have your Twitter feed open on a second monitor, and maybe you're listening to a podcast in the background, you are firing dozens of random, unrelated neural circuits simultaneously.
You're sending construction crews to pave 50 different dirt roads all at once.
Yes. And none of them get enough resources to actually build a highway. You never isolate the specific skill circuit enough to trigger those oligodendrocytes to begin the myelination process.
So you're exhausting yourself, but not actually learning.
You are burning cognitive energy, but you are not biologically cementing the skill. To learn hard things quickly, you have to focus intensely without distraction.
But mastering hard things is really only half the equation here.
Right. You also need to produce at an elite level.
Which introduces us to Adam Grant. The guy is essentially the poster child for elite academic production.
He's a machine.
He became the youngest full professor at the Wharton School of Business. And the sheer volume of academic papers he produces is just absurd.
It's totally anomalous for his field.
In 2012 alone, he published 7 articles in major peer-reviewed journals, which is practically unheard of. People assume he must just be a genius who doesn't sleep.
But his secret is actually extreme batching.
Yeah, he treats his time with architectural precision. He stacks all of his teaching requirements into the fall semester so he can be entirely present for his students.
And then what does he do in the spring?
In the spring and summer, he completely drops off the map. He totally isolates himself. He will put an out-of-office autoresponder on his email for days at a time and just vanish into a single, highly defined research task.
He isn't just prioritizing his tasks there. He is actively manipulating his brain's executive control network.
He's trying to avoid that phenomenon that I found absolutely terrifying in the source material.
You're referring to attention residue.
Yes, attention residue.
This is a concept developed by business professor Sophie Leroy. Her research uncovered a fundamental flaw in how modern knowledge workers operate.
We think we can multitask.
We think we can seamlessly multitask or rapidly switch between projects. But Leroy found that when you switch your focus from task A to task B, your attention doesn't immediately and cleanly follow you.
It gets left behind.
A significant residue of your attention remains stuck, processing the original task in your working memory.
Let me make sure I understand the actual mechanics of this. Say I am writing a highly complex strategic brief.
Okay.
It requires holding a lot of variables in my head. Suddenly, my phone buzzes. I glance down, and it's an email from my boss asking about a completely different project, one that I can't even resolve right now.
Right, a classic interruption.
When I pull my eyes away from the phone and look back at my strategic brief, my brain hasn't fully returned, has it?
Exactly. The executive function of your brain has to load the context of your boss's email. And it takes actual time and metabolic energy, specifically glucose in the brain, to clear that context out and reload the context of your strategic brief.
So I'm measurably dumber for a few minutes.
Leroy's experiments demonstrated that people experiencing this attention residue perform significantly worse on their current task. Their cognitive capacity is fractured.
So by working on a single hard task for extraordinarily long stretches, without checking email or switching contexts, Adam Grant minimizes this attention residue.
Yes. He allows his brain to operate at a peak level of cognitive intensity that a distracted professor who is checking their inbox every 20 minutes simply cannot biologically match.
I buy the neuroscience completely. The data is clear. But I have to push back here.
Okay, push back.
Because reality doesn't always look like Adam Grant's summer sabbatical. Look at Jack Dorsey.
Okay, the Twitter founder.
This is the guy who helped found Twitter, then launched Square.
Yeah.
He was a billionaire running two massive publicly traded companies simultaneously.
Yeah.
He famously rejected the idea of working in isolation. He worked at stand-up tables, right in the middle of the open floor plan, specifically so his employees could interrupt him constantly.
He wanted the interruption.
He thrived on rapid-fire distraction. Doesn't his multi-billion-dollar success completely invalidate this whole deep work hypothesis?
It's a really critical pushback, but Dorsey is actually the exception that proves the rule.
How so?
We have to differentiate between the nature of a knowledge worker's job and the specific nature of a CEO's job.
Oh.
A chief executive of a massive enterprise is essentially a highly refined, hard-to-automate decision engine.
A decision engine.
Throughout his career, Dorsey built up a massive internal repository of experience and market intuition. His primary value to Twitter or Square wasn't sitting alone for 5 hours writing code.
Right.
His value was being presented with complex inputs all day long, crises, product pivots, personnel issues, and processing them rapidly into actionable decisions for his team.
Ah, I see the distinction. So if you told Jack Dorsey to go lock himself in Young's Stone Tower for 4 hours to think deeply about a single line of code, you'd actually be wasting his specific economic value.
Exactly. He shouldn't be doing the deep work himself. He should be hiring 3 brilliant, highly focused subordinates to do the deep work.
And then they bring him the distilled options to choose from.
That's precisely the dynamic. His job is to manage the output of deep workers. But the trap is that the 99% of us who are not elite CEOs look at Dorsey and think, well, the billionaire is constantly on his phone and getting interrupted, so that must be how successful people work.
We copy the wrong behavior.
For the average knowledge worker, adopting the highly distracted habits of a CEO is a terrible blueprint. Our value in the marketplace comes from the depth and quality of our direct output, not from the rapid-fire distribution of our decisions.
Okay, so we have firmly established that deep work is biologically necessary for learning and economically lucrative for producing.
It is the core driver of value.
Which brings us to a massive, glaring paradox. If deep work is so incredibly valuable, why are modern corporations doing practically everything in their power to destroy it?
It's a great question.
We are building massive, open floor plans designed to force serendipitous interaction. You have IBM publicly bragging about their employees sending 2.5 million instant messages a single day, as if that's a good thing.
Like it's a badge of honor.
You have legacy media institutions like the New York Times forcing their elite, Pulitzer-winning investigative journalists to maintain active Twitter accounts. Why is the business world aggressively prioritizing distraction over depth?
It stems from a profound measurement problem, which the sources call the metric black hole.
The metric black hole. Explain that.
Think back to the industrial age. Productivity was incredibly easy to measure. You stood on an assembly line, and at the end of your shift, management counted how many physical widgets you cranked out.
Simple math, 50 widgets equals a good day.
Right. But in modern knowledge work, it is objectively difficult, if not impossible, to measure a single individual's direct contribution to a firm's overall output.
The sources highlight an incredible story about this measurement crisis involving Tom Cochran. He was the former chief technology officer of Atlantic Media.
Oh, this experiment is wild.
He started to feel this ambient anxiety that his team was just drowning in communication rather than producing anything of value.
He realized he personally was spending an hour and a half every single day just processing his inbox.
So he decides to drag this problem out of the black hole and quantify it. He ran a company-wide experiment. He pulled the server data on the total number of emails sent across the entire company. He factored in average human reading speed, average typing speed, and cross-referenced it with the average salary data of all the employees.
And the number he found was staggering.
When he ran the math, he discovered that the simple act of processing email was costing Atlantic Media over $1 million a year in pure labor costs.
$1 million just to read and write emails.
He pointed out that it was the financial equivalent of the company buying a brand new Learjet every single year just to move internal information around.
It's a staggering figure. But the most crucial takeaway from Cochran's experiment isn't just the $1 million price tag. It's how incredibly complex and laborious it was just to calculate that cost.
Right. Most companies aren't doing that math.
Most companies will never go through that level of forensic accounting to figure out how much money Slack or Outlook is bleeding from their bottom line.
So because they can't measure it, they just ignore it.
Because the financial impact of distraction is so hard to quantify, businesses inevitably fall victim to the principle of least resistance.
Meaning it's just easier in the moment to shoot a message over to your colleague than it is to think ahead.
Exactly. A culture of constant connectivity is simply easier for everyone involved. If I can message you at any moment and demand an instant reply, it saves me from having to plan my day, organize my thoughts, or manage my own time effectively.
You just outsource your poor planning to my inbox.
Yes. And because the executives can't measure the bottom line value of depth, the employees respond by adopting what the sources call busyness as a proxy for productivity.
This hits so close to home. Right. If I am sitting in an open office and I have absolutely no quantifiable metric to prove to my boss that I am a valuable asset, I am going to make damn sure I look incredibly busy.
You have to perform work.
I'm going to make sure my boss sees me firing off emails at 9:30 p.m. I'm going to make sure I chime in on the team Slack channel within 30 seconds of a question being asked, even if my answer is totally pointless.
I am publicly performing the act of working because I don't have an industrial age widget to hide behind.
We are essentially using exhaustion as a metric for value.
But there is a much deeper, more profound consequence to this shallow corporate culture.
Right.
We've talked extensively about the economic costs, but we really have to look at the deeply personal, psychological cost of a life completely devoid of depth.
So what does this all mean? This is where the deep dive takes a really philosophical turn. What does this constant distraction actually do to the human spirit?
The sources offer this fascinating juxtaposition to explain it.
They introduce us to Rick Furr.
Yes, the traditional blacksmith.
He meticulously recreates medieval metalworking techniques by hand. It is grueling, physical labor. He will heat a piece of steel and strike it 100 times with a hammer to shape it, when a modern industrial machine could stamp it out in a fraction of a second.
Right, it's totally inefficient from an industrial standpoint.
But when he talks about his work, his artist statement is incredibly moving. He finds deep, profound, almost spiritual meaning in the act of shaping that metal.
While meanwhile, you have millions of modern knowledge workers who are theoretically doing smarter, more advanced work in climate-controlled offices.
Who feel totally empty, cynical, and disenchanted just pushing digital paper around all day.
Exactly. Why is the blacksmith happier than the brand manager?
Science actually backs up exactly why furrer feels so fulfilled, and it has nothing to do with metal versus digital data.
It has everything to do with attention.
Right, there's the science writer Winifred Gallagher. She explored this deeply after receiving a devastating advanced cancer diagnosis.
Which is an unimaginable situation. Understandably, she assumed her life would be consumed by fear and misery from that point on.
But she made a conscious choice to intensely focus her remaining attention only on the things that mattered: her family, her writing, a walk in the evening.
She dove into the neuroscience of attention and realized a fundamental biological truth. Your world is essentially the outcome of what you pay attention to.
So it's a zero-sum game in the brain.
Yes.
If you focus deeply on a highly challenging, important task, like striking the steel exactly right,
Yeah.
your brain literally does not have the leftover neurological bandwidth to notice the negative, shallow, or trivial things that tend to drain the meaning from our lives.
To build on that, deep focus essentially hijacks the brain's attention apparatus.
Hmm.
The pioneering psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi proved this empirically with his famous studies on flow.
Flow states, right?
He used the experience sampling method. He gave participants these pagers that would ping them randomly throughout the day, prompting them to record their exact emotional state and what they were doing at that exact moment.
And the results totally shattered our cultural assumptions about work and leisure, right?
Completely shattered them. We tend to think of work as a burden and free time as a joy.
Everybody's working for the weekend.
Exactly. But Csikszentmihalyi found the exact opposite. People were consistently happier, more engaged, and felt more meaning while they were at work than they did during their unstructured free time.
Because work actually provides the psychological architecture for flow. It has clear goals, immediate feedback, and challenges that literally force you to concentrate.
Yes. Free time, on the other hand, is generally unstructured. And without a specific goal, the human mind tends to default to rumination, anxiety, or low-quality, shallow distractions.
Which leave us feeling totally empty.
Right.
I love how this synthesizes it. It completely relieves the pressure of needing a perfect career.
Yeah.
You don't need to quit your corporate job, move to the woods, and become a medieval blacksmith to find meaning in your life.
No, you don't need a rarefied job. You just need a rarefied approach to your job.
A wooden wagon wheel isn't inherently noble or deeply meaningful, but the careful, deep, focused shaping of it can be. Depth is what brings meaning to the mundane.
Which pivots us from the philosophy to the actual execution. We have firmly established why deep work is economically necessary, biologically grounded, and personally meaningful.
Now we have to answer the hardest question.
How do we actually integrate this into a reality full of bosses, smartphones, and exhaustion?
And the first, perhaps harshest reality we must face is that simply wanting to focus more is a strategy completely doomed to fail.
Right. Relying on sheer willpower is a losing game. Which brings us to rule number 1 for achieving this superpower: work deeply.
You have to accept that your willpower is a finite resource.
There is a famous, rigorous study by psychologists Wilhelm Hoffman and Roy Baumeister that tracked people's desires throughout a normal day.
What do they find?
They found that human beings are essentially engaged in a constant, endless battle against their own urges. The urge to eat junk food, the urge to sleep in, the urge to check social media, the urge to surf the web instead of write a report.
And crucially, the subjects lost these battles constantly.
They demonstrated a concept known as ego depletion. Willpower isn't a character trait. It operates much more like a battery.
Okay, so it drains over time.
Every single time you resist checking your phone during a boring meeting, you drain a little bit of that battery.
So by 3 p.m., you're running on empty.
Exactly. If you rely purely on willpower to wrest your attention away from a highly addictive internet interface at 3 p.m. when your battery is totally drained, the algorithm will win every single time.
You cannot out-willpower thousands of engineers in Silicon Valley who specifically designed these tools to capture your attention.
So we have to bypass willpower entirely. We need routines and rituals that minimize the friction of transitioning into a deep state so we don't have to spend any willpower just to start working.
In an absolute utopia, we would all have access to what architect David Duane calls the eudaimonia machine.
Eudaimonia being the ancient Greek concept of human flourishing.
Right. Duane designed a literal, conceptual building explicitly tailored to generate the deepest possible work.
How is it laid out?
It's a linear structure with 5 distinct rooms. You walk into the gallery. then a salon for socializing, then a library for gathering resources, then an office for shallow logistical work, and finally, at the very back, completely soundproofed and isolated, is a deep work chamber.
So the architecture itself forces your brain into deeper states of focus as you move through it.
It's a beautiful concept, but practically speaking, none of us are going to convince our HR departments to build us a 5-room psychological gauntlet.
Yeah, good luck with that.
So we have to simulate the eudaimonia machine in our own messy lives. And the first step to doing that is choosing a depth philosophy that actually aligns with your specific career and lifestyle.
Because if you pick the wrong structure, the habit will violently reject you.
Totally. The sources lay out 4 distinct philosophies of depth. The first is the monastic philosophy.
This is the most extreme one, right?
Yeah, you maximize your depth by eliminating shallow obligations entirely from your life. The classic example given is computer scientist Donald Knuth. The man is a legend in programming. He famously does not use email at all.
Not at all.
He hasn't used it since 1990.
Wow.
On his website, he explicitly states that his job is to think big thoughts, not to manage communication. He provides a physical mailing address and says his assistant might sort through the letters every few months.
It's incredibly badass, but let's be real, most of us can't be monastic.
If I tried that at my job, telling my boss I no longer answer emails, please send a courier pigeon, I wouldn't achieve deep work. I would achieve unemployment.
That's a vital point. The monastic approach only works if your specific value to the world is highly discrete, individualized, and unassailable.
So for the rest of us, there is option 2, the bimodal philosophy.
Okay, what's that?
This involves dividing your time into distinct, clearly defined, deep versus open stretches. This is Carl Jung retreating to his stone tower for weeks and then returning to his clinical practice in Zurich. Or an academic taking a summer sabbatical to write a book.
So during the deep stretch, you act completely monastically, but during the open stretch, you are highly available and communicative.
But again, this requires a level of autonomy that many people simply don't have. You need the flexibility to literally disappear for days or weeks at a time without getting fired.
Which brings us to the third and probably most realistic approach for the standard knowledge worker, the rhythmic philosophy.
This is about turning deep work into a regular, non-negotiable daily habit to entirely remove the friction of scheduling it. You don't have to decide when to work deeply. The rhythm decides for you.
A phenomenal example of this is comedian Jerry Seinfeld's famous chain method.
Oh, yeah, the calendar.
When he was a young comic, his goal was to write better jokes, which requires deep, focused thought. He bought a massive wall calendar and a red marker. Every single day, he completed a deep writing session. He drew a big red X over that day.
After a few days, he had a chain.
His only psychological goal was simply, don't break the chain. It turns the daunting task of deep work into a simple, daily gamification.
I also love the story of Brian Chappell from the sources. He was a doctoral candidate working a demanding full-time day job, and his wife just had a new baby.
Finding time to write a complex dissertation in that environment seems impossible.
But he adopted a brutal but highly effective rhythmic schedule. He woke up and worked on his dissertation from 5:00 to 7:30 a.m. every single weekday, no exceptions.
So he got his deep work accomplished before the daily shallow chaos of emails, bosses, and babies could even begin.
Finally, there is the journalistic philosophy. This involves fitting deep work into your schedule whenever you possibly can, grabbing time like a journalist furiously writing an article on deadline.
Right. The biographer, Walter Isaacson, used this method to write his massive Cold War history, The Wise Men.
While he was rapidly ascending the editorial ranks at Time magazine.
Yeah, a highly demanding job. But he would simply retreat to his study anytime there was a free hour on a weekend, immediately drop into a deep state, and write.
But the sources issue a massive warning about the journalistic approach. It is not for beginners.
You have to have an incredibly developed mental muscle to switch from a shallow, chaotic mode into a deep, intense mode instantly.
Most people's attention residue would just cripple them in that scenario.
Yeah.
So you're sitting there listening to this, evaluate your own life. Are you a daily rhythmic worker? Can you pull off bimodal weekend retreats? You have to pick one, and once you do, you have to strictly ritualize it.
The author David Brooks summarized this need for ritual perfectly. He said, "Great creative minds think like artists but work like accountants."
You cannot wait for inspiration to strike.
You need strict parameters to support your depth. Where exactly will you work? Is there a specific quiet conference room you can book? Will you work at the kitchen table? And how will you systematically support the work?
Like, will you start with a specific brand of coffee to signal your brain? Will you employ software that physically blocks the internet during the session?
Sometimes normal rituals aren't enough, and you have to rely on what the sources call a grand gesture to trigger focus.
This is about leveraging psychology and perceived value. Think about J.K. Rowling. She was struggling to finish the final Harry Potter book.
Right, she was super famous at this point.
Rich and famous, her house was full of kids and dogs and window washers, and she just couldn't concentrate. So she packed her bags and paid $1,000 a day to check into a luxury suite at a Hogwarts-style hotel in Edinburgh just to write.
It sounds extravagant, but the psychology is totally sound. By radically changing her environment and attaching a massive financial cost to the session, she sent a powerful signal to her brain's executive function.
Basically telling it, this is important. We have invested heavily in this. You must focus.
Bill Gates utilized a similar strategy with his famous Think Weeks, flying out to an isolated cabin in the woods just to read and process ideas.
Beyond the environment, how do we actually track if we are succeeding?
The sources recommend porting over a corporate management framework called the 4 Disciplines of Execution, or 4DX, to our personal habits.
Discipline 1. Focus on the wildly important.
Don't just sit down and vaguely say, I want to work deeply today. You need a specific, ambitious, tangible goal that absolutely requires depth to achieve, like writing a chapter or mastering a coding language.
Discipline 2. Act on laid measures, not lag measures.
This is a crucial distinction that trips a lot of people up. A lag measure is the final result you are trying to achieve, like academic papers published or revenue generated.
The problem with a lag measure is that by the time you can actually measure it, it's in the past. You can no longer change it.
But a lead measure is the specific behavior that directly drives the lag measure.
So for deep work, your lead measure is incredibly simple. It is strictly the number of hours you spent in a state of deep focus.
Exactly. You stop obsessing over the final product and you singularly track the hours. The results will take care of themselves.
Which leads seamlessly into Discipline 3. Keep a compelling scoreboard. Visually track those deep work hours somewhere you can see them every single day.
And Discipline 4. Create a cadence of accountability. Maybe every Friday afternoon you do a weekly review where you analyze your scoreboard and plan your deep work blocks for the upcoming week.
Now, I want to talk about my favorite strategy in the entire deep dive.
Oh, the laziness one.
Yes, it sounds completely counterintuitive to everything we've discussed about pushing your limits. The strategy is, be lazy.
I love this part.
There's a quote from writer Tim Kreider where he says, I am the laziest, ambitious person I know. He realized the absolute biological necessity of a rigid workday shutdown.
When the day is done, you must completely stop working. No checking email after dinner. No running mental replays of the day's crises while watching TV.
He's tapping into a vital piece of cognitive science known as attention restoration theory, or RT.
The core premise of RT is that our directed attention, that effortful, top-down focus we use for deep work, is a highly finite resource.
It physically burns glucose in the brain.
You can exhaust it. A famous experiment at the University of Michigan demonstrated exactly how to restore it.
This study blew my mind. They took subjects and mentally exhausted them with a highly demanding cognitive test. Then they split them into 2 groups. Half the group was sent to walk through a quiet, wooded nature park.
And the other half.
The other half was sent to walk through the bustling downtown city streets of Ann Arbor.
And when they returned and took another cognitive test, the nature walkers completely outperformed the city walkers.
The researchers deduced that a city walk requires constant low-level vigilance. You have to actively use your directed attention to not get hit by a car, to dodge pedestrians, to process street signs. It's draining.
But a nature walk provides what they call soft fascination. It engages your brain gently, from the bottom up, allowing your directed attention circuits to completely rest and restore their capacity.
And just to prove, it wasn't just that the nature walkers were in a good mood from a beautiful sunny day. The researchers famously repeated the entire study in the brutal, freezing Michigan winter.
And the results were identical. It was the cognitive rest, not the weather, that actually mattered.
Furthermore, your unconscious mind actually needs that completely unbothered downtime to untangle complex professional problems.
If you are constantly answering trivial emails late into the night, you are robbing your brain of the restorative downtime it desperately needs to perform deep work the next morning.
The mandate is clear. When you work, work incredibly hard. When you are done, be entirely done.
All right, so let's say you've done everything right. You've set up your rituals, you've chosen your rhythmic philosophy, you've rested your brain with a nature walk.
You sit down to do the deep work.
And 12 minutes later, you are mindlessly scrolling through a news site.
Exactly. Why does that happen? Because despite your perfect schedule, your brain is fundamentally addicted to novelty, which demands we address rule number 2, embrace boredom.
This requires a major paradigm shift. We have to view concentration not as a mood that just strikes us, but as a mental muscle that requires grueling training.
The sources highlight an incredible cultural example of this. The Tennessee Yisrael Synagogue.
Yeah, the Talmud study.
Orthodox Jews gather there, waking up at 6 a.m. every single day to study incredibly dense, complex Talmudic texts. They argue, debate, and strain to understand ancient Aramaic.
One prominent businessman who participated in this ritual noted how this consistent, intense mental strain over the years profoundly increased his creative insight at his actual job.
By struggling with the Talmud, he was essentially taking his concentration to the gym. He trained his brain to tolerate immense cognitive difficulty without giving up.
Meanwhile, the modern knowledge worker runs from cognitive difficulty like it's a plague. The very second we feel a hint of boredom waiting in line at the grocery store, sitting at a red light, staring at a difficult spreadsheet, we immediately pull out our phones.
We are constantly training our brains thousands of times a week that boredom is unacceptable and must be immediately resolved with a hit of digital dopamine.
The neurological consequence of that is devastating. You wire your brain to expect a constant variable reward schedule. It's the exact same psychological mechanism that makes slot machines addictive.
This is why the incredibly popular concept of the Internet Sabbath, the idea that taking one day a week off from technology will cure your distraction, is fundamentally flawed.
I think of it like dieting. If you eat a perfectly healthy salad just one single day a week, but you gorge on fast food the other 6 days, you aren't going to lose an ounce of weight.
If you spend 6 days frantically context switching and scrolling every time you feel a slight lull in stimulation, one offline Sunday is not going to magically rewire your neural pathways.
To actually rewire the brain, the sources issue a highly provocative challenge. Do not schedule breaks from distraction. Instead, you must schedule breaks from focus.
This is a brilliant tactical flip. You keep a physical notepad right next to your computer. You write down the exact time you are next allowed to use the internet, say 30 minutes from now.
And for those 30 minutes, you are absolutely, unequivocally offline.
And here is the brutal part. If you get stuck on your work, and you legitimately need a piece of information from the web to proceed too bad, you cannot go online.
You have to skip that part, work on something else, or just sit there and face the agonizing boredom.
But that agony is the feeling of the muscle growing. By rigidly segregating your internet use, you are forcibly teaching your brain to tolerate an absence of novelty.
Every single time you feel the intense urge to click over to a news site and you actively resist it because your notepad says you have 14 minutes left, you are performing a mental calisthenic.
You are strengthening your distraction-resisting neural pathways.
You can also use what the sources call Roosevelt dashes, named after the young Teddy Roosevelt.
Right, when he was a student at Harvard, he had massive extracurricular interests: boxing, writing, naturalism. So he had very little time for actual studying.
To cope, he would give himself incredibly tight, almost impossible deadlines to finish his reading.
It's like high-intensity interval training for the brain. Give yourself a deadline for a task that is so close it requires extreme, almost painful intensity to meet. You physically cannot be distracted because you literally don't have the time to look away.
Another highly effective training technique introduced is productive meditation.
The mechanics of this are fascinating. You take a period where you are occupied physically but not mentally, like walking to work or jogging or mowing the lawn, and you force your attention to focus repeatedly on a single, well-defined professional problem.
I've tried this, and it is incredibly hard. Just like traditional mindfulness meditation, your mind inevitably wanders off. You start thinking about an argument you had yesterday or what you're going to eat for dinner.
But the practice isn't about perfectly holding the focus. The practice is the act of noticing the distraction and gently but firmly pulling your attention back to the professional problem.
That physical act of redirecting your attention strengthens your concentration and often yields surprisingly deep, lateral insights into the problem.
But we have to be honest. Even if you build that mental muscle, it doesn't stand a chance if you surround yourself with tools actively designed by thousands of engineers to break it.
Which brings us to the most controversial mandate, rule number 3. quit social media.
Here is where it gets really interesting, because this is where the conversation usually gets derailed, but the sources handle it brilliantly. They explicitly critique a guy named Baraton the Thurston.
He was a highly connected digital consultant who got so burnt out by his hyper-connected life that he famously unplugged from the internet entirely for 25 days.
And he wrote a big article about it. But the sources call this a total straw man argument.
Mm.
It creates a false binary that protects our bad habits.
We tell ourselves that either we accept being distracted digital addicts, or we have to completely quit the internet, move to a cabin, and become hermits. And since we obviously can't be hermits, we just accept the addiction.
That false binary excuses immense laziness in how we curate our digital lives. The real issue is the faulty framework we use to evaluate our tools.
The vast majority of people operate with what is called the any benefit mindset.
The any benefit mindset. What's that?
This framework dictates that you are justified in using a network tool if you can identify any possible benefit to its use or any potential thing you might miss out on if you delete it.
Like, I have to stay on Facebook because I might miss seeing a picture of my cousin's new baby. Or, I absolutely need to be on Twitter because I might miss a breaking news article about my industry.
Exactly. The problem with the any benefit mindset is that it completely ignores the hidden costs. The alternative framework is the craftsman approach.
A master craftsman evaluates digital tools the exact same way a blacksmith evaluates a new hammer. They identify their core professional and personal goals, and they only adopt a tool if its positive impacts substantially and demonstrably outweigh its negative impacts.
This connects directly to a foundational economic principle, the law of the vital few, also known as the 80-20 rule or the Pareto principle.
Vilfredo Pareto originally noticed that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. But this asymmetry applies to cognitive effort as well.
In most professional settings, 80% of your success comes from just 20% of your activities.
If we apply that to knowledge work, the revelation is stark. If your goal is to be a brilliant, highly paid writer, your vital 20% activities are deep, rigorous research and careful, focused writing.
Does maintaining a highly active Twitter presence significantly boost those specific vital activities? No.
In fact, by fragmenting your attention and depleting your daily willpower, it actively harms them. This is exactly why mega best-selling authors like Malcolm Gladwell, Michael Lewis, and George Packer actively avoid Twitter.
They redirect the immense time and cognitive energy they would have spent tweeting directly into the vital 20% of activities that actually generate their world-class success.
But the fear of missing out, the FOMO, is so deeply ingrained in us. To combat this, the sources recommend a brilliant, slightly terrifying strategy borrowed from a minimalist named Ryan Nicodemus.
He wanted to simplify his physical life, so he threw a packing party. He packed every single belonging he owned into boxes as if he were moving out. Over the next month, he only unpacked the specific items he actually needed to use.
We can apply that exact same methodology to our digital lives. Perform a 30-day packing party on your network tools, delete the apps, quit all of them, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, cold turkey, for 30 days.
But here's the absolutely crucial rule. Do not announce that you are leaving. No dramatic farewell posts. Just silently disappear.
After 30 days of digital silence, you ask yourself two deeply revealing questions. First, would the last 30 days of my life have been notably better if I had been able to use this specific service?
And second, did anyone actually care that I wasn't using it?
For most people, the sobering, ego-bruising answer to both questions is a resounding no. Going through that withdrawal provides a massive dose of reality.
It pierces through the billion-dollar marketing illusion that these platforms are the critical lifeblood of our connected world. In reality, they're often just lightweight whimsy designed to harvest and fragment your attention for ad revenue.
But there is a trap here. If you successfully quit social media, you suddenly have a massive vacuum of time. What do you do with all that reclaimed mental energy?
The sources reference an incredible 20th century writer, Arnold Bennett. He observed white-collar workers in London constantly complaining that they had no time to pursue their passions.
Yet Bennett noted they spent 16 hours a day outside of work doing practically nothing of substance. Bennett fiercely advocated for a day within a day. He argued you must proactively, aggressively structure your leisure time. If you do not plan your evenings and weekends with high-quality activities, human nature will inevitably default to the easiest, lowest friction option: algorithmic infotainment.
You will replace Twitter with infinite scrolling on Reddit or mindlessly watching YouTube.
You have to intentionally fill the vacuum with demanding, high-quality activities, reading difficult books, engaging in physical hobbies, exercising, having meaningful, undistracted conversations so that the addictive websites don't sneak back in and steal your cognitive recovery time.
All right, let's take stock. We have tackled the internal limits of our willpower. We have actively practiced being bored. We have ruthlessly audited our digital tools using the craftsman approach.
Now we reach the final and perhaps most structural step, rule number 4, drain the shallows.
Even if your mind is perfectly honed, it doesn't matter if your schedule is a chaotic mess. We have to look at the workday itself.
The foundational story for draining the shallows comes from the software company 37 Signals, which is now known as Basecamp. They decided to run a radical experiment. They shortened their entire company work week to just 4 days during the summer months.
Most managers would panic and assume productivity would plummet by 20%.
But the surprising result, the employees accomplished the exact same total amount of high-quality work in 4 days as they previously did in 5.
How is that mathematically possible?
Because the compressed schedule imposed a massive constraint. It forced the employees to ruthlessly cut out the shallow work. The pointless hour-long meetings were canceled. The constant performative email checking stopped.
When faced with a hard deadline, the employees realized that the shallow work was surprisingly dispensable.
37 Signals actually took it a step further later on and gave their employees a full month off from all regular duties to work entirely on their own innovative ideas, free from any shallow interruptions. And the business didn't just survive, it thrived.
This proves a massive point. The importance of shallow work in corporate culture is vastly, almost comically overestimated. Now, obviously, you can't eliminate it completely. You still have to pay invoices and schedule calls.
But you must ruthlessly confine it so it doesn't bleed into and crowd out your deep work capacity, which, by the way, maxes out at about 4 hours a day, even for the most highly trained, adept thinkers.
To physically confine the shallow work, the sources suggest something that sounds incredibly tedious but is profoundly effective. You must schedule every single minute of your workday.
A British TV survey highlighted why this is necessary. They asked people to estimate how much television they watched a week. The average guess was 15 hours.
But when researchers put tracking meters on their televisions, it proved they were actually watching 28 hours a week.
Yeah.
Human beings are terrible at estimating time. We spend huge swaths of our day operating on complete autopilot.
By physically scheduling your day into blocks, writing down 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. is deep research, 11 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. is email processing, 11:30 to 12 p.m. is a team meeting, you are forced to confront the actual reality of how much time you are bleeding out to shallow tasks.
Now, I anticipate a major objection here. Doesn't blocking out every minute of your day feel incredibly stifling? If I schedule every minute, where's the room for spontaneity or a brilliant, unexpected flash of creative insight?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, I had the exact same thought. It feels like you are turning yourself into a robot.
Right.
But what I realized is that the schedule isn't a rigid, inescapable prison. It's a tool for intentionality. If you stumble onto a brilliant breakthrough insight at 10 a.m., you don't stop just because your schedule says so. You embrace the insight, and you simply take 5 seconds to rewrite the rest of your schedule for the afternoon.
Structure doesn't stifle innovation. It actually instigates it by preventing you from defaulting to mindless web surfing the second a task gets slightly difficult.
But to schedule effectively, you have to accurately judge what is shallow and what is deep. And that line can get blurry. Some emails are actually important and require thought, right?
Exactly. So the sources provide the ultimate objective test for this. It is called the college grad test. You look at a task and ask, how many months of dedicated training would it take for a smart, recent college graduate to figure out how to complete this specific task?
If you are architecting a complex SQL database that requires months, maybe years of training, that is objectively deep work.
If you are formatting a PowerPoint presentation or scheduling a Zoom meeting over email, a college grad could learn how to do that in about 4 hours. That is shallow work.
Once you ruthlessly identify the shallow work, you need to go to your boss and ask for a shallow work budget. Have an explicit, transparent conversation. Ask them, what percentage of my time do you actually want me spending on shallow logistics versus depth execution?
For most knowledge workers, the ideal target is between 30 and 50%. Securing that explicit budget from leadership gives you the political cover to start saying no to pointless meetings or trivial projects that would push you over your limit into a totally shallow existence.
We see this principle modeled flawlessly by Ratika Nagpal, a highly successful Harvard professor. She wanted to achieve tenure, but she refused to sacrifice her entire life to the frantic, publish or perish academic culture.
So she utilized what the sources call fixed schedule productivity. She firmly decided she would only work 50 hours a week, period.
To make that math work and still get tenure, she had to place draconian quotas on her shallow obligations. For instance, she decided she would only travel for speaking engagements 5 times a year, compared to the standard 15 to 20 trips most ambitious professors took.
By aggressively capping the shallow work, she relentlessly protected the deep foundational research that ultimately earned her tenure on her own terms.
And the final tactical piece of draining the shallows is becoming significantly harder to reach. We all suffer from this fatalistic acceptance that if someone sends us an email, we fundamentally owe them a rapid response.
You have to actively break that social contract. You can use sender filters, force people to do more work before they are allowed to contact you.
The sources mention a consultant named Antonio Centino. If you want to email him, you have to click through a web page and literally check a series of boxes promising you have thoroughly searched his extensive FAQ section first. It filters out the lazy inquiries instantly.
And when you do finally reply to the emails that make it through, you need to adopt a practice called closing the loop. Most people send terrible open-ended emails.
If someone emails you saying, hey, let's grab coffee to discuss the project, when are you free? The natural instinct is to just reply, sounds good, maybe next week, which then generates 5 more shallow ping-pong emails back and forth trying to nail down a time.
Instead, you close the loop immediately. You take the extra 2 minutes of cognitive effort up front to outline the entire resolution. You write, I'd love to get coffee. I'm free Thursday at 10 a.m. or Friday at 2 p.m. at the Starbucks on Main Street. If either works, just reply confirming the time and I'll see you there. If neither works, please propose 2 other times and locations and I will make one work.
Boom. You have outlined the entire process to resolve the project in one single message. It reclaims massive amounts of mental real estate and drastically reduces your total inbox volume.
It shifts the default setting of your professional life from convenience and constant availability to strict intentionality and depth.
Let's pull all of this together, because we have covered a massive, sprawling landscape today. Deep work, the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task, is not a luxury. It is an increasingly rare, profoundly valuable economic skill.
It physically wires your brain, building the myelin necessary for elite high-speed production, and it psychologically protects you from the void of meaningless busyness.
And to achieve it, we can't just try harder. We must structurally rebuild our lives. We have to choose a depth philosophy, whether that's rhythmic morning sessions or bimodal retreats.
We have to actively practice being bored to train our neurobiology. We have to ruthlessly audit our digital tools, casting off the algorithmic slot machines using the craftsman approach. And we must aggressively, unapologetically drain our schedules of the shallow logistics that masquerade as actual work.
To wrap this up, I want to offer a final thought to really chew on. Cal Newport, the author of our source material, explicitly notes that deep work is not a moral imperative, it's just highly pragmatic. But if we extrapolate this out, the implications are staggering.
How so?
If the entire global workforce continues to fracture its collective attention, checking screens every 4 minutes, what happens to humanity's capacity to solve truly existential, massively complex problems? Are we filtering out our greatest potential scientific breakthroughs or social innovations simply because the necessary grueling thought process isn't algorithmically engaging enough for our depleted brains?
That is a terrifying thought.
Your personal ability to go deep isn't just an economic advantage for your own career. It might just be the very foundational skill required to preserve human progress itself.
So tomorrow morning, when you sit down at your desk and the urge to check your inbox hits you, I want you to think about Carl Jung in 1922. Think about that 2-story stone tower on the freezing edge of the lake, no electricity, no notifications, just the quiet, intense hum of a mind being pushed to its absolute biological limit, shaping ideas that would literally change the world. To you, the listener, thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Remember, in an economy built on distraction, your focused attention is your single most valuable asset. Guard it fiercely.